So, imagine you pick up a book, a heavy, physical, completely static object made of bound paper. Or, maybe you're just scrolling through a fixed, unresponsive PDF on your monitor.
Right, a completely motionless medium.
Exactly. And the author of that text is attempting to teach you the mechanics of fluid dynamic movement. I mean, it is the educational equivalent of trying to teach someone how to salsa dance by sliding a stack of Polaroid photographs across a table.
That is a brilliant way to put it, yeah.
Because, you can see the start position and you can see the finish position, but the soul of the thing, the momentum, the rhythm, the actual physical transfer of energy is just completely absent. You are literally forced to imagine all the in-between states.
It's a massive structural contradiction. I mean, you are staring at an unmoving two-dimensional page, trying to reverse engineer a living, breathing user interface that fundamentally exists in a dimension of time. And yet, conquering that specific cognitive dissonance is really the only way a designer moves from building static, flat wireframes to engineering digital environments that actually feel, organic to a human being.
Yeah.
The theory has to precede the execution, right? Otherwise, the execution is just chaotic flailing.
Well, that transition from static to living that's our core mission today. We are pulling apart the underlying architecture of digital motion.
We really are.
And our focus today is hyper-specific. We are dissecting the core load-bearing design concepts of user interface animation, specifically targeted at someone who is just beginning their career in UI design.
Which is such a critical phase to get this right.
Totally. And the roadmap for this entire breakdown comes directly from Chapter 20, Animation of the Book Design User Interface. It is essentially the primer on how to stop thinking exclusively in static screens and start thinking in time.
Because time is the dimension most junior designers just completely neglect. They obsess over the grid, the typography, the exact hex codes of their color palette.
Oh yeah, spending hours on a shade of blue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they leave the dimension of time as a complete afterthought. It's just something to be handed off to a developer to figure out later. But that specific chapter forces you to confront time as an actual, malleable design material, just like typography or whitespace.
Right. And for the listener, we want to make sure you have the actual source text to anchor this conversation. You can find Design User Interface at the Hype4 Academy Gumroad. The link is https://hype4academy.gumroad.com/liebook.
It's an incredible resource.
It really is. And you can buy the book easily by scanning the QR code of the book link provided in the description below. And while you're down there in the description, please make sure you follow for more technical design breakdowns and career-building content. Because, well, we are going to be unpacking a lot of these foundational concepts.
We definitely have a lot of ground to cover. So, to lay the groundwork, we really need to address the most fundamental definition provided in the text.
Okay, let's unpack this. What actually is an animation in the context of a screen?
Right. Stripped of all the software jargon and the timeline tools, the text defines it simply as a change of state over time.
A change of state. So what does that look like practically?
Well, that state could be a scale, like a button expanding or shrinking. It could be position, right? Like a menu sliding from the left edge of the glass to the center. It could be shape or rotation or opacity.
I buy it.
But fundamentally, it is just an object deciding it no longer wants to be in state A and moving to state B over a defined period of milliseconds.
Okay, but I'm looking at the text right now, and it throws down a very stern restriction right after establishing that definition. It tells beginners to master those 2D basic state changes, the X and Y axis, the scale, the opacity, and strictly avoid 3D transitions.
It does, very explicitly.
But, I mean, if you look at trendy design portfolios online right now, they are absolutely covered in 3D flipping cards, rotating geometric shapes, massive spatial environments. Why is the book telling a junior designer to actively avoid the thing that gets, so many likes on social media?
That's the trap, right there. It comes down to what happens when that theoretical design hits an actual engineering team and an actual user's device.
Ah, the reality check.
Exactly. Those trendy 3D movements look fantastic in a compressed MP4 video on a portfolio site. But implementing them in a live native application requires heavy, complex coding libraries.
Right. It's not just a flat image anymore.
No, they demand massive amounts of extra planning, rigorous developer handoff, and intense performance testing. Every single time a phone has to render true 3D spatial calculations, it is draining the battery, it's heating up the processor, and you're risking dropped frames.
Wait, really? So it's an incredibly expensive design choice, computationally speaking.
Highly expensive. And if a beginner hasn't even mastered how to move a flat rectangle from the left side of the screen to the right side without it feeling jarring, well, introducing a z-axis into the equation is just a recipe for a sluggish, broken app.
That makes total sense.
The foundational lesson here is to master the two-dimensional plane first, because you can communicate incredible depth, hierarchy, and elegance using only scale, position, shape, and rotation.
Okay, so let's dig into the psychology of why we are moving that flat rectangle in the first place. Because the text presents a philosophical split early on. The functional purpose of motion versus the trap of decoration.
Yes, this is a crucial distinction.
I really want to unpack this because I think a lot of people, especially beginners, assume animation exists purely to make an app look modern or, expensive.
And that assumption is the root cause of incredibly frustrating software. According to the source, animation serves 4 very specific functional roles in an interface.
Okay, what are they?
First, it aids navigation. It shows the user where they currently are within the architecture of the app and where they can go next. Second, it provides context, gives information about what action just occurred. Third, it shows the progress of a current ongoing task, so the user doesn't think the app is frozen. And finally, the fourth role is decoration motion, with the sole purpose of delighting the user.
Okay, but the text immediately follows that up with a massive caveat. It explicitly instructs the reader to limit that fourth kind, the decorative kind, to an absolute bare minimum.
No.
I want to push back on that for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
If user retention is built on positive reinforcement, right? And delighting the user creates positive reinforcement, why on earth would we want to artificially limit how much delight we put into the interface? Shouldn't every single tap be a party?
It's a fair question, but you have to think about the neurological cost of processing motion. From a purely evolutionary standpoint, the human visual cortex is hardwired to prioritize tracking movement.
Like biologically?
Yes, biologically. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, if something moved in our peripheral vision, our brain demanded an immediate assessment. Is that movement a predator or is it prey? Is it a threat or an opportunity? Our brains literally cannot ignore motion. It is an involuntary biological reflex.
Wow, so we are hijacked by movement.
Exactly, hijacked. So transpose that biology into a digital interface. If a user opens a dashboard to check their bank balance, they have a singular focused goal.
Right, they just want their number.
Right. But if upon opening that screen, 5 different decorative geometric shapes start bouncing, a background gradient spins, and the text fades in on a staggered wave just to look delightful, you are biologically exhausting the user's brain.
Oh, because everything is a potential predator or prey?
Yes. You are forcing their visual cortex to process 5 different moving threats or opportunities that have absolutely nothing to do with their bank balance. The text rightfully notes that having too many animated objects spikes cognitive load. It creates immediate frustration, and it makes the core architecture of the interface actively harder to parse.
I love thinking about this through a culinary analogy. Think of decorative animation like a remarkably potent hot sauce.
Okay, I like where this is going.
So, if a chef prepares a perfectly cooked, beautifully balanced dish, say, a complex taco, a few carefully placed drops of that hot sauce will elevate the entire experience.
Right, it adds that kick.
Exactly. It enhances the underlying flavor profile, it creates a sudden, memorable spike of delight, and it guides the palate. But if you unscrew the cap and pour 8 ounces of that hot sauce all over the plate, you don't have a meal anymore.
No, you've completely ruined the structural integrity of the dish.
Exactly. The user can't taste the protein or the garnish. All they feel is an overwhelming assault on their senses, and they will never order it again.
It is spot on. The hot sauce is the delight, but the meal itself is the actual utility the user came to your app to extract.
Right.
For a beginner, showing restraint learning to put the hot sauce bottle down and trust the core ingredients of typography, spacing, and layout is deeply counterintuitive. You want to show off your software skills. You want to prove you know how to make things spin.
Yeah, you want to use every tool in the toolbox.
But the text is pleading with the designer. Let the user consume the meal. Use motion only to guide the fork.
Okay, so we've established a philosophy. We are animating to guide, we are animating to inform, and we are exercising extreme restraint.
Yes.
Now we need to look at the literal mechanics of orchestration. How do we actually dictate the journey of an element from point A to point B? Because, a junior designer might be visualizing traditional cell-by-cell animation.
Right, like a 1930s Disney cartoon where you have to draw Mickey Mouse's foot 20 different times just to make it tap.
Exactly. That is the mental model many people bring to the table. But the text clarifies how modern UI design tools handle these transitions mathematically.
Yes, you are not an illustrator. You are defining parameters. When we talk about transitions, we are describing the interpolation of an object over a given time.
Interpolation.
Yes, so we mentioned position, scale, and rotation. But the source expands that vocabulary to include shape, gradient, shadow, color, and transparency. Modern tools simulate the change between those properties.
So you don't have to draw the in-betweens.
Exactly. You only need to design the initial state, the starting point, and the final state. The software's engine calculates the mathematics of all the subpixels in between.
Okay, to make this hyper-concrete based on the text examples, let's say you want to move a primary call to action button across the screen. You don't animate the movement frame by frame. You simply place the button at an x-coordinate of 100 on your first artboard, that is state A.
Right.
You duplicate that entire artboard, and on the second one, you drag that button to an x-coordinate of 200, state B. You tell the software, execute this delta over 2,000 milliseconds, and the computer just renders the journey.
You become an orchestrator of time rather than a draftsman of frames. But the text introduces another critical variable alongside duration. And this is where true UI choreography really begins. And that's the delay.
The delay, okay.
Because duration is how long the movement takes.
Yeah.
Delay is how long the object waits before it even begins moving.
Let's build a scenario to understand the gravity of that, because moving one button horizontally is simple math. But consider a complex interface.
Okay, let's say a dense analytics dashboard.
Yeah, a user authenticates and opens this dashboard. There is a top navigation bar, a side menu, a central data visualization chart, a profile avatar, and a list of recent activities. So what does this all mean for building a whole screen? If we just apply a 500 millisecond duration to all of those elements to slide onto the screen, what happens?
You get a visual explosion. If you don't use delays, every single element fires simultaneously.
Right.
The navigation drops down, the menu slides in, the chart scales up, the avatar fades in, all occupying the exact same window of time. It is chaotic.
Everything, everywhere, all at once.
Exactly. And returning to our biological imperative, the user's eye doesn't know where to land first because there's massive peripheral movement in all four quadrants of the screen. By utilizing staggered delays, the designer seizes control of the user's optical focus.
You are acting as a digital film director, controlling the narrative pacing of the data.
Precisely. You might have the structural elements, the top navigation bar, and the side menu load instantly at 0 seconds, because the user needs to immediately understand the boundaries of the room they just walked into.
That makes sense. Establish the walls.
Right. Then you apply a 100 millisecond delay to the profile avatar, then a 250 millisecond delay to the main data chart, then a 400 millisecond delay to the list of recent activities cascading downwards.
Wow, so you're leading them.
You are consciously leading the user's eye from the structural perimeter to their own identity, to the primary information, and finally to the secondary details. And in the exact sequential order you want them to consume the hierarchy, you create structure out of a blank screen simply by withholding time.
Withholding time to create hierarchy. That is a brilliant way to frame it. But getting an element from x equals 100 to x equals 200, even at the right sequential moment, is only half the battle. Because how fast that element travels along its designated path dictates whether your application feels like a rigid, robotic spreadsheet from an MS-DOS terminal or a premium, organic, modern environment. And this brings us to the concept of easing curves.
Yes, and what's fascinating here is that easing is, without exaggeration, the single most important concept in UI animation to separate amateur work from professional work.
Really? The single most important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The text defines easing as a mathematical curve function that modifies the speed of our animation over its duration. If you ignore easing, if you just leave the design software on its default setting, you do what is called linear animation.
And what does that look like?
Linear means the object moves from point A to point B at a constant, unvarying pace from the very first millisecond to the last.
It is entirely mechanical. It feels like a conveyor belt.
It feels uncanny, and there is a deep physiological reason for that. What is vital to understand here is the connection between digital easing curves and real-world physical laws. In the physical universe, almost absolutely nothing moves linearly.
Right.
Objects have mass. They have inertia. They are subject to friction and gravity. If you are driving a car away from a stoplight, you do not instantly teleport to 60 miles per hour. maintain exactly 60 miles per hour without fluctuating a single digit, and then instantly drop to 0 miles per hour when you hit a brick wall at the next intersection.
If you did, the G-force would break your neck.
Right. You have to overcome inertia. You press the gas pedal, the engine generates torque, and you gradually accelerate. You ease in.
Okay, I see.
And as you approach the destination, you apply the brakes, friction fights the momentum, and you gradually decelerate. You ease out. Digital easing in UI mimics this natural physical dynamic.
Yeah.
It manipulates the speed at the start, the middle, or the end of your animation within that exact same overall time frame.
Let's visualize the specific examples the text provides because the math of it is fascinating. Let's take a 2-second animation of a circular token moving from the left edge of your screen to the right edge. If we use linear easing, we know that at the exact 1-second mark, exactly halftime, that token will be sitting precisely in the dead center of the screen because the pace never changed.
A perfect 1-to-1 ratio of time and distance.
Right, but if we apply an ease-in curve to that same token over the same 2 seconds, at that exact 1-second halftime mark, the token is not in the middle. It is actually lagging behind, closer to the starting line.
Exactly.
Why? Because it started its journey slowly, it had to build up digital momentum, but to arrive at the finish line at the 2-second mark, it now has to drastically speed up in the second half of the journey to compensate.
Yes, that's ease in.
And conversely, an ease-out curve does the opposite. At the 1-second mark, the token has already sprinted past the center line. It exploded off the starting block, and now it will spend the remaining seconds slowly applying the brakes, gently gliding into its final resting position.
That visualization perfectly captures how manipulating the curve assigns a feeling of weight and friction to pixels. But the text issues a very strict mandate for beginners regarding these curves. When you establish a particular easing vocabulary for a project, you must adhere to it with militant consistency.
I want to challenge that because, if I'm building a complex app, maybe I want my side menu to ease in aggressively, but I want my toggle buttons to snap linearly, and I want my photo gallery to ease out softly. If variety is the spice of life, why is mixing easing curves such a cardinal sin in UI design?
Because you are not just painting a picture, you are establishing the underlying physics engine of a digital universe. When a user interacts with your software, they're subconsciously learning the rules of your world.
Okay, so they're mapping out how things work.
Right. If you mix your physical rules, if one object behaves like it is a heavy block of wood sliding on ice, and another object behaves like a feather falling through honey, and a third object moves like a rigid, gear-driven robot, the digital environment feels fundamentally unstable.
It induces a kind of digital vertigo.
It feels unpredictable. And human beings are deeply averse to unpredictable environments. When an interface behaves with inconsistent physical laws, the user's brain subconsciously decides that the application itself is untrustworthy.
Oh, wow. It goes that deep.
It does. If the buttons can't decide how much they weigh, can I trust this app to securely process my credit card? Probably not. Consistency in your easing curves makes the digital world feel solid, reliable, and expertly engineered.
You are quite literally writing the laws of physics for a microuniverse. And speaking of physical laws, the text dedicates substantial time to a physics-based animation that is so ubiquitous, so universally recognizable, that it requires its own dedicated mathematical formulas.
We have to talk about the bounce.
Oh yes, the bounce is legendary in UI history. The text accurately notes that this specific effect exploded into the mainstream consciousness with the release of the original iPhone. Apple utilized it heavily across the iOS interface to create the rubber banding effect. I remember the first time I experienced that. You are scrolling through a massive list of contacts, you swipe aggressively, you hit the absolute bottom of the list, and instead of the screen hitting a hard, jarring dead stop like a cursor, hitting the edge of a monitor, the list stretches downwards past its boundary, creates tension, and seamlessly snaps back into place. It felt like holding a physical object.
It was a masterclass in affordance. It proved to be incredibly user-friendly because it communicated physical boundaries intuitively, using the metaphor of a tense spring rather than, an error message.
Right.
But the text provides strict mathematical guardrails for achieving this effect, because a poorly executed bounce is worse than no bounce at all. A proper, premium-feeling soft bounce relies heavily on an 80-20 time rule.
Okay, let's break that math down slowly, because this is where beginners usually destroy their designs.
Let's use our x-axis translation example again. We want an object to travel from an x-coordinate of 100 to an x-coordinate of 200. To create the physical illusion of a bounce, the object cannot simply stop at 200.
Right, that would just be linear.
Exactly. It must travel past the destination to show momentum, and then retreat. The 80-20 rule states that the object should hit its maximum point of overshoot at exactly 80% of the total animation duration. It then uses the remaining 20% of the duration to pull back, lose its kinetic energy, and settle into the final 200 coordinate.
So if I have a 2-second animation, the object flies past the finish line, reaches its absolute maximum stretch at 1.6 seconds, and spends the final 0.4 seconds recovering and sliding backward into its resting place.
Correct. That handles the dimension of time. But time is useless without restricting the dimension of distance. The text establishes a very clear threshold here. The physical distance that your object exceeds the final state by should never be larger than 20% of the total travel distance.
Wait, really? Never. Here's where it gets really interesting. Here is a hypothetical scenario. A junior designer wants their app to feel incredibly playful and energetic. They understand the 80-20 time rule, but they decide to overshoot the physical target by 40 or 50% just to give it a massive, cartoonish snap. What happens to the user experience when you violate that 20% distance threshold?
The source text actually employs the word grotesque to describe this exact violation.
Grotesque. That is a strong word for a UI design book.
It is accurate, though. If you exceed that 20% threshold, and the text explicitly notes that an overshoot of 10 to 20% is the optimal realistic sweet spot, the animation ceases to feel like natural rubber, tension, or physical momentum.
It just looks broken.
It breaks the illusion of physics. It looks frantic. It looks glitchy. It goes from feeling like a premium, meticulously crafted interaction to feeling like a broken, malfunctioning cartoon spring that is vibrating out of control.
It makes me think of human body language and conversation. A good, subtle 10 to 20% soft bounce is like a polite, reassuring nod. You ask the app to scroll to the bottom, and the app nods gently, acknowledging, yep, I've reached the bottom, here is the tension.
I like that.
But if you crank that bounce distance up to 45%, it is the equivalent of the app aggressively, violently shaking its head at you. It is alarming, it pulls the user completely out of their workflow, and it is absolutely grotesque. The rule is ironclad. Stick to the 80-20 time split and never let the overshoot distance exceed 20%.
And it is worth noting that this physical logic applies to more than just X and Y coordinate movement. You can and should apply this bounce methodology when scaling an object up, perhaps a modal window blooming open, or rotating an icon into an active state. The identical mathematical ratios apply to keep the expansion or rotation feeling grounded in the laws of natural tension.
Okay, let's shift our focus from manipulating the illusion of physical space to manipulating the user's perception of time itself, specifically the psychology of waiting.
Waiting.
Yeah. No matter how optimized a codebase is, there are moments where an app has to pause to fetch data from a server, process an image, or authenticate a credential, and nobody likes waiting. It breeds anxiety. This brings us to the critical components of progress bars and spinners.
This is a vital area where UI animation transcends aesthetics and serves as pure psychological relief. The text points out that even a slow-moving, agonizingly steady progress bar tells the user something of paramount importance. We have not abandoned you, the application has not crashed, the system is still breathing, and we are working on your request in the background.
It actively neutralizes the user's fear of technical failure.
Yes.
It is the psychological difference between standing in a slow-moving line at a grocery store where you can physically see the cashier scanning items up ahead versus being locked in a windowless waiting room with a closed door. Even if the wait time is identical, knowing the mechanism is functioning keeps panic at bay.
Exactly. A progress bar, typically a horizontal rectangular track, filling from left to right, acts as that window into the system's status. Now, technically, the animation of that fill can be linear moving at a slow, constant, predicted pace over a set duration, or it can reflect actual raw data packets loading.
Where it might sit at 20% for 3 seconds and then suddenly jump to 80%.
Right, as a large payload resolves. But the real lesson the text provides for beginners here is the rigor required in the component design itself.
This is where the gap between a mock-up and a coded product becomes obvious, right? Because a beginner often just draws one nice-looking half-filled blue bar and calls it a day.
And that is entirely insufficient for engineering. A designer must construct the component across multiple distinct temporal states to properly hand it off to a developer. You must design the empty state, the track before the process begins. You must design the in-progress state, demonstrating the animation behavior. You must design the completely full 100% success state.
And I'm guessing an error state, too.
Crucially, yes. You must design an interrupted or error state, because servers time out, connections drop, and the UI must communicate that failure instantly through a state change. Perhaps stopping the animation, turning the bar crimson red, and displaying a warning icon.
But regarding that successful 100% state, there is a specific creative technique outlined in the text that feels like a massive revelation for a junior designer.
The button transformation.
Yes. It suggests that when the progress bar finally reaches 100%, you can obviously show success by turning it green, but taking the animation a step further, you can actually transform the physical shape of that fully loaded progress bar, expanding it to become a clickable continue button.
If we analyze that structurally, it is an example of brilliant, frictionless UX design.
It really is. It seamlessly blends the delivery of information. Hey, we have successfully finished processing your file with the immediate, actionable next step. Click right here to proceed to the next screen. Think about the user's optical focus. Their eyes have been glued to that specific horizontal rectangle for the last 5 seconds, waiting for it to reach the right edge.
Right.
If a continue button suddenly pops up in the bottom right corner of the screen, or the top right header, you force the user's eye to break focus, scan the interface, hunt for the new interactive element, and move their thumb to a new location. By transforming the object they are already staring at into the vehicle for the next action, you maintain an unbroken state of flow.
You reduce the cognitive friction to almost zero. The user doesn't have to search for the next step. The next step is born out of the completion of the current step. And of course, the text also addresses the spinner, the simple, looping, rotating circular shape.
When do we use that instead of progress bar?
This component is deployed when the system absolutely cannot predict or calculate how long a process will take. You can't give the user a percentage of completion, but the continuous hypnotic rotating animation still provides that baseline psychological relief that the application hasn't frozen.
Keep the system breathing. Even if you don't know when it will finish, prove that it is trying. So we've analyzed individual components like buttons, toggle switches, and progress indicators. We need to zoom out and look at the macro architecture. Let's talk about spatial mapping, navigation logic, and how entire screens transition into one another.
In mobile application design particularly, where real estate is severely limited, screen transitions are the primary mechanism for building a coherent mental model for the user.
Because you only have one small window.
Right. The text explains that screen animations should imitate physical realities, like the turning of a page in a book, or sliding a physical piece of paper over another to establish the context of where each screen exists within a digital spatial architecture.
So an app isn't just a sequence of flat pictures replacing each other. It is a conceptual stack of cards or a hallway with rooms leading off of it.
Exactly. And the source gives a very clear, highly consequential spatial logic example regarding directional cues. Imagine a user is on a setting screen. At the top left, there's a back arrow pointing to the left.
Very standard.
The user's brain processes that arrow and subconsciously assumes that the previous screen, the main dashboard, is physically waiting just off-screen, resting in an invisible space to the left side of their phone's bevel. Therefore, to fulfill that subconscious architectural expectation, when the user taps that arrow, the old screen must slide inward from the left edge, physically pushing the current setting screen off to the right.
Let's play devil's advocate. What happens if a beginner gets, creative and makes the back screen drop down from the top? They want their portfolio to pop, so they program it so that when the user taps that left-pointing back arrow, the previous dashboard screen drops down from the ceiling, covering the settings screen.
The text warns against breaking this logic in the strongest possible terms. If you program the screen to drop from the top when the visual cue points to the left, you completely shatter the user's mental map of the application.
You are betraying the laws of physics you just promised them.
You are inducing disorientation. If the back screen lives above me, why does the arrow point left? Now the user doesn't know where they are in the architecture. Are they moving sideways? Are they moving up? You must design screen transitions in a way that the user inherently expects them to appear, based entirely on the directional cues and UI elements you have provided.
So it's all about trust again.
Yes. Spatial consistency is the only psychological trick that makes a flat, two-dimensional piece of glass feel like a multidimensional, physical, navigable space.
That is a profound way to contextualize it. We are utilizing calculated motion to build a convincing illusion of physical architecture inside a pane of glass. All right, let's reverse the lens. We just looked at the macro moving entire walls of the digital room. Now let's zoom all the way back into the micro, the absolute atomic level details. Let's explore micro interactions, the unsung microscopic heroes of user feedback.
Microinteractions are, as the text states, an absolutely vital circulatory system for any interface. They are defined technically as a way to visually communicate a change of state of a specific object, triggered by a direct user action.
So it's a reaction to the user.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Their primary overarching purpose is to give the user instantaneous, visceral feedback, either confirmation or rejection, about an action they just attempted.
Because without that feedback loop, digital actions feel completely numb.
They feel dead and they feel jarring. Consider a settings menu. If you tap a setting to activate it, and the pixel state simply flips instantaneously from a 0 to a 1, from a gray off state to a green on state without a single frame of transition, it lacks humanity.
It's too robotic.
A microinteraction smooths that binary switch and provides physical confirmation. The text points to the classic mobile toggle switch as the perfect example. When you tap it, the track color fades from gray to green, but crucially, the circular knob physically slides across the track from left to right. That 200 millisecond sliding motion provides instant, intuitive feedback that your command was received and physically executed by the system.
It mimics the tactile satisfaction of flipping a heavy physical light switch on a wall. You don't just want the light to turn on, you want to feel the mechanism engage.
The visual motion replaces the tactile physical feedback we lose on a touchscreen. Another excellent example the text provides is the floating action button, commonly known as a FAB.
Oh, like the big plus sign on mobile apps.
Exactly. You see a circular, brightly colored button lingering in the bottom right corner of the screen, bearing a plus icon. You tap it to compose a new message or add an item. Through a microinteraction, that central plus icon rotates exactly 45 degrees, transforming mathematically into an X, while the background color perhaps shifts from blue to red.
Oh, wow, yeah. That tiny change says so much.
That tiny, seamless rotation instantly communicates to the user, the menu is now open, I am in an active state, and this exact same piece of real estate is now the button you use to cancel or close.
And the text also ties this deeply into material design principles, specifically regarding the hover effect on desktop environments. You move your mouse cursor over a product card on an e-commerce site or a photograph in a gallery. The moment the cursor enters the boundary of the card, the object scales up by perhaps 2%, and the drop shadow beneath it extends outward and softens its blur radius.
Right, creating depth.
It creates this beautiful optical illusion that the digital card has physically lifted up off the surface of the page, bringing itself closer to the user's eye to say, I'm aware of your cursor and I am ready to be clicked.
It is a brilliant mechanism because it communicates profound interactivity without requiring a single syllable of explanatory text. But the sourcebook provides a very strict, uncompromising golden rule about the application of these effects.
What's the rule?
Microinteractions must be restricted exclusively to actionable UI elements. Buttons, interactive cards, input forms, slider bars. You must vigorously avoid placing hover effects or microanimations on static text, inactive icons, or purely decorative imagery.
Why is that a golden rule? Let's say I'm designing a landing page, and I think it would look incredibly dynamic if my main H1 headline gave a little delightful bounce whenever the user's mouse accidentally brushed past it. If the animation is smooth, why does the book forbid it?
This raises an important question, and the answer is because in the language of digital design, motion implies action. It is an affordance.
So it's promising something.
Exactly. If an element in a digital interface reacts to a user's cursor or touch by moving, expanding, or changing color, the interface is making a silent promise to the user that this specific element can be interacted with. It is signaling, I am a button, click me.
Oh, I see.
If you animate a static piece of headline text to glow or bounce when someone hovers over it, the user will instinctively assume it is a hyperlink or a drop-down trigger. They will attempt to click it. And when nothing happens, because it is just static text, they will feel confused. If they click it twice and nothing happens, they will assume your application is broken.
You've tricked them.
You've fundamentally broken their trust. Microinteractions are a specialized vocabulary of action, and you cannot use the vocabulary of action on objects that lack the capacity to act.
Do not lie to your users with motion. If it moves, it better do something. That is such a vital, practical lesson for beginners who want to animate everything they can select on an artboard.
Okay, we have arrived at our final technical exploration. And this concept brilliantly bridges the gap between our flat 2D UI plane and the grand illusion of actual dimensional 3D depth.
We need to dissect parallax-scrolling.
Parallax-scrolling is a visually arresting effect. Its technical origins are actually rooted deep in classic 2D video game development, specifically the 16-bit era.
Oh, like the old side-scrollers?
Yes. The core mechanical concept relies entirely on the calculated displacement between different layers of assets. Stripped down, it simply means that background layers move at a slower rate of speed than foreground layers when the user scrolls the page.
The best way to visualize this is to think about human optics when you are sitting in the passenger seat of a car driving down a highway. You look out the side window. The wooden fence, positioned right next to the shoulder of the road, is blurring past your eyes at an incredibly high velocity.
Right.
But the mountain range, positioned 20 miles away on the horizon, barely appears to be moving at all. Our brain processes that difference in velocity to calculate distance and depth. Parallax takes that biological optical illusion motion parallax and forces it onto a flat screen.
It creates a staggering illusion of depth within a purely two-dimensional scene, without requiring any complex 3D rendering engines. But to achieve this effectively, the text insists on a minimum structural requirement. A designer must utilize at least 3 distinct visual layers, moving at 3 distinct speeds to achieve the full psychological benefit.
3 layers minimum.
A foreground layer that moves the fastest, representing objects closest to the glass. A middle ground containing the primary content. And a background layer, perhaps a texture or a landscape, that moves the slowest.
The source notes that this technique is incredibly potent and popular on marketing landing pages, or during the initial onboarding carousel of a premium mobile app where the primary goal is to immerse and wow the user. But it also lays down some very heavy physiological restrictions. You can implement parallax scrolling horizontally, like swiping through an onboarding tutorial, or you can implement it vertically, like scrolling down a long web page. But the text strongly implies you should never, ever mix the axes recklessly.
Absolutely. You must restrict the parallax motion to one dominant axis. If you attempt to have elements moving at multiple disparate speeds horizontally while simultaneously having other layered elements moving at different speeds vertically, the optical illusion breaks down and becomes something actively hostile to the user.
I am picturing an app attempting to do both simultaneously, and honestly, just visualizing it induces a sense of vestibular disconnect. It gives me a dizzying, seasick feeling. The foreground text is scrolling up, the middle ground imagery is sliding to the left, the background is drifting diagonally. The brain cannot parse the physical reality of the space.
It overwhelms the visual cortex, and that visceral reaction leads directly into the final overarching warning in the text about parallax, which beautifully echoes the very first lesson we discussed today regarding decoration.
Right, the hot sauce.
You must ensure that the parallax effect serves to enhance the narrative experience rather than destroying the usability of the interface. You must actively avoid using parallax on every single element or dragging it into every single section of a heavy text-based website. Establish a consistent logical speed multiplier for each of your 3 layers and deploy the effects sparingly.
We are right back to the hot sauce analogy. Parallax is the ultimate hot sauce. Use it to highlight the premium nature of the landing page. Use it to draw the eye to the hero image, but do not ground the entire plate in it. If the user is trying to read a dense paragraph of terms and conditions, the background shouldn't be sliding around behind the text.
Form must follow function. Motion must serve clarity.
Well, we have covered a truly incredible amount of architectural ground today. Let's do a comprehensive recap of this journey because the sheer volume of mechanics we unpacked is immense. We started by dismantling the assumption that animation is a superficial decoration, realizing instead that it is a functional, load-bearing tool used to guide navigation, provide context, and manage cognitive load.
And we learned that modern UI designers act as orchestrators of time, moving past frame-by-frame illustration to manipulate mathematical start and final states. We utilize strategic delays to choreograph the loading of complex screens, preventing visual explosions, and guiding the user's eyes sequentially.
We explored how ease and curves inject the physical laws of mass, momentum, and friction into a sterile digital space, saving our UI from the robotic, uncanny valley. We learned that maintaining consistent ease and curves is the foundation of building a trustworthy digital universe. We mastered the rigid mathematics of the bounce, the 80-20 time rule, and the strict 10 to 20% distance threshold to prevent our interfaces from feeling like grotesque broken springs.
We examined the psychology of waiting, breaking down the mandatory states of progress indicators to relieve user anxiety. And we explored the seamless UX of transforming a loaded bar into a call to action. We mapped the spatial architecture of screen transitions, ensuring our physical animations always match the directional cues to preserve the user's mental map.
We zoomed in on the microscopic heroes of feedback microinteractions, realizing that motion is a promise of affordance and we must never lie to our users by animating static, non-actionable text. And finally, we dissected the biological optical illusion of parallax-scrolling, using layered velocities to carve deep 3D space out of a flat 2D screen while avoiding vestibular overload.
It is a remarkably comprehensive foundation for anyone stepping into the field. But before we conclude, I want to leave the listener with a final, slightly philosophical thought that builds on everything we've meticulously analyzed today.
Oh, I like a good philosophical thought. Hit us with it.
We've spent this entire session obsessing over how elements move, how fast they travel, the exact math of their easing curves, and how they capture the human eye. But if the ultimate final goal of all these transitions, delays, and micro-interactions is to create a truly natural, seamless experience, is it possible that the absolute greatest UI animation is actually the one the user never consciously notices, but would instantly deeply miss if you took it away?
Oh man, that is the perfect question to chew on. Is the pinnacle of UI animation total invisibility? Does true mastery mean the motion feels so organic, so inevitable, that the user just assumes the pixels are bound by real-world gravity? That is the mark of true design right there. Well, as a final reminder, our mission today was to provide this rigorous foundation for career starters, and all of this incredible, detailed insight was extracted directly from Chapter 20. Animation of the book Design User Interface.
It is absolute required reading if you want to internalize these mechanics and move beyond static design.
Absolutely, and you can get your hands on it right now. The link is https://hyped4academy.gumroad.com/louisbook. Remember, you can buy the book easily by scanning the QR code of the book link provided in the description below. And please make sure you follow us for more technical design breakdowns and career building content. We will be doing many more deep dives into the mechanics of product design.
It has been a genuine pleasure unpacking the architecture of motion with you today.
So next time you are holding your phone, staring down at that flat glass rectangle, take a few seconds to appreciate the invisible, meticulously calculated physics engine operating right under your thumb. The polite, subtle bounces, the accelerating momentum of an easing curve, the staggered loading of a dashboard, the layers of depth in a parallax scroll. It is not magic. It is highly intentional design. See you on the next deep dive.